Traditional Black Magic, The Secrets of the Kimbanda Magicians by Diego de Oxóssi. So, this book by Diego is, firstly, it's a very thin book, but it's a very jam-packed good book. Especially if you're new to the subject of Kimbanda and essentially Brazilian black magic as a whole. Now, this was originally, I believe, published in Portuguese, and then it was translated over into English and now been released through Inner Traditions. And I just want to kind of give you a little bit of a guide of why I like this book, and also like who I think this book would be for. So I would kind of start off just by saying that this book is not for necessarily an experienced Kimbanda practitioner. If you're already experienced, this is definitely not a good book. This, even by Diego's own admission, as you will find if you're depending on when you're watching this, if you're catching the interview that I have with him around this, he says himself, this is what they consider their 101. This is really the beginner guide, and if you go for workshops and trainings, or if you go and get initiated, none of these things are going to be covered. All of these things are going to be assumed. And I personally enjoyed this because one of the little blurbs on this book is by Nikolai. And Nikolai de Matos is, as many of you will know, probably one of the most published and authoritative people in this specific area. And him and Diego share a personal relationship. So even though I personally was very familiar with Nikolai's work in terms of the Eshu and various aspects of Kimbanda, this really helped me put in perspective the initiatory systems, of the process, which was quite a great idea and quite a great methodology for it. He has some very interesting perspectives on the process of the path. So I'm going to kind of like back to front this a little bit. So what I love in the back here is you've got a couple of very beautiful prayers and devotions. And it's nice because you've got the Portuguese and then you've got the English translation of that for its core kind of rituals. And I kind of like a back to front also because it's easier for me to scroll when I'm showing that to you from this perspective. But some very nice practical pieces, some of the signatures, some of the utilization of music. So you, at the end, you kind of have a nice little basic, magical signature correspondence system and how to work with those specific Esru. And you also kind of look at like some of their divination methods, specifically the cowrie and the cowrie shells. Looking further back, some of the kind of setting types, like how the temples are basically set up in the practice, and the altars are set up with some nice pictures to kind of support that idea. Very, very cool. He also talks here in this section about the knives and the stages of initiation. So the initiation and the passage rites, where he explores those and really gives you a little bit of detail. So I wasn't very familiar with these initiatory processes and really what it meant, what the knives meant and how they're utilized. And the idea that you can actually only do certain sacrifices when you're at certain degrees because the knives are kind of charged and consecrated for that. And there's 5 knives kind of in total. But a very nice kind of exploration now, even in this section, where we actually look at the hierarchy, the spiritual hierarchy, and what he breaks down into the realms and the domains inside of the practice, which is also a very interesting kind of groundwork just on the view. These are some, also again, supportive, some nice practices. There you can see Diego, and I believe it's some of his embodiment pictures where he is being where he's being embodied. And he also kind of opens up in that in the very early parts where he talks about the difference between embodiment versus possession and their views and their cosmology, how it fits. There's also a good translation between the African language, the Portuguese, and everything else. A nice kind of correlation for me was the concept of spirit deities and talking about the Mayoral, and again how that thing corresponds to the Baphomet, and really what that actually means in their tradition and what these comparisons are. Now, obviously, you're not going to find as detailed a kind of hierarchy as you would in Nikolaj's work, but especially if you're just looking for a clear, clean perspective of where everything fits in, this is absolutely it's a good read. It's a nicely put together one, and again, like, it is very good for somebody that is beginning. You're not necessarily going to step away from this with a series of very advanced techniques that you can practice. There will be some kind of suggestions in terms of prayers and devotions and stuff like that, but this is going to give you a very good foundational understanding of the practice of Kimbanda, as well as some of these traditions, where they came from, how they developed, how Kimbanda became, you know, stretched out of Umbanda. And if you're looking for a lot more detailed information, I do recommend you check out the interview that I've got with Diego, and that'll give you a lot more detail. And if you're only watching this the moment this comes out, do remember that book releases are on Tuesdays, and their supporting interviews, where possible, will then be on the Thursday. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.